All right, so for those people who are installing MySQL for the first time, I'm going to do a few things. First, I'm going to describe what the installation has done, right? And we'll discuss some of the coder in the background before we click buttons to see what's running. So I'm going to find wherever I installed my own version of MySQL. Okay, that's my workbench. Sorry. I think I installed a 64-bit version, so. Okay, I think this is my folder for MySQL, right? I have a lot of installations just for teaching so many courses. So if you've installed the server, whether version 5 or version 6, right? This is what will be there when you are finished installing. You have a bin folder. You don't have to memorize all of this, but it's good to know as a professional. When you install something, you know what actually happens to the machine. Not that you open it, you have no idea what's going on. Right. So in your bin folder, there are a few, well, just two that I'll mention for now. The first one is MySQL. If you installed it, you find MySQL. That is the client, and you also have MySQL D. That should be a D. There, right? Okay. The client is called Guest MySQL, and the daemon. Right. So that's two parts of the database. Right. So for a database to run, there has to be a client and a server. Just as if you are browsing a website, you have your client is what? Your browser, right? And your server is maybe Apache server or XAMPP, depending. So when you type something, the server responds and then what? Gives you your data back. Or you make a request, the server responds. Now, for those who have installed, some people installed it and it joined your Windows services. So I'll go to just starting services, right? So people who are administrators on their own machines, right? You find services in the list, sorry. And this is what Windows services will look like. And all the things that are installed. So services are things that are usually running in the background. You don't have to have necessarily user interface. They may. But there are things that the OS, programs that it's hosting so that you can get some services or some features. So if you look through mine, I have currently two versions of MySQL that are running, but one is stopped. Version 5 is stopped, but version 6 is running. So if you installed MySQL and you have to install a service, you would see it running here, right? Now, how do we actually get the database to do anything for us? So I'm going to just stop the one that's running as a service. Right? If it's running as a service, if it says started, it just means that what? It's currently running. That means it can listen. Just as if you turn your computer on and it's running, it can do something for you. But if it's stopped, so in your services, you can start or stop. You can only do this if you are the administrator of the machine. If you are not the administrator, I'm going to go a little bit fast. So I'm recording it, but then I'll slow down at the end, right? So there are two reasons why I'm doing this. Some people have installed, and we need to make sure that the people who are installing in different ways are on the same page. So if there's something I'm doing that you've not done, just take it as more informational. So the video will go up so you can take your time through it. Right. So I'll talk about the services and also how to run it in command prompt so that you can get the two ideas in your mind. That there's a program running that is called what? Your database, and there's a client that is taking a request. So that is my goal for going through this today. Yes, you hear my voice. Guess I commented from previous videos of mine where I don't talk. Yeah, in classroom I can't avoid it. So when I'm in class, you will hear my voice. Right. So I have to make sure I talk down a little bit. So I make sure I catch everything. So that's a good point. Okay. So you can start and stop a service. So remember, a service is just a program that is running, right, and responding to commands. Right? But even though I'm doing this, I'm hoping that when you take your time, watch, or if you've made notes, by Friday, you understand some of the things that I've done. This is for lab, but I'm getting you started so you don't waste the whole week. You can start some of the things. Okay, so review. What is happening today? We have gotten to chapter 2 of the textbook. In chapter 2, we are supposed to be talking about design, the relational model. That is how our database is designed. What is the structure? Right. At the same time, we have also installed the software. We are using MySQL. There are many others, but MySQL is a database management system in which we can do our table design. Right. So what I'm doing is I'm showing you what MySQL is doing so that I can present you with the features of the database. You have installed, but right now you're not really using it. But people installed in different ways. Some people installed and got a service, right? So if you didn't get a service, that's fine. But I also show you exactly the code that is giving you your database management system before you start using it. Right. So so that people can put things into context, I'm going to start. Sorry, I have to use a mouse, so it's slicker. Come on. Okay, maybe I have to pick roots. Let me just pick. Hmm. Fresh. All right. So if you start Workbench, see when I dive in up to this part, people get confused. But I'll do it. I'll just show you so people know where we are heading. Right. So if you start Workbench, what Workbench is just an interface that allows you to manipulate your database. But I was trying to show you what was happening in the backend before you come here. But I'll just discuss this part. Right. So it means anytime I want to enter some data, right? So let me just make a simple table. Make a simple table and I'll enter some information. You don't need to memorize the commands for creating tables right now. I'm just showing you where the endpoint will be. Okay, so person ID. Right, refresh. All right, so this is a database, right? So this is a database, and there's a table here in which I can enter some information, maybe first name, last name. So the people who are wondering where are we heading, this is where we are heading. We want to get to the point where you can be entering some information, right? But I don't want you to just be end users. I want you to also understand what software is behind this. What is allowing it that when I type, if I enter something, I be Alice dot. Sorry for the lowercase. I should make it all caps, right? Kwame Bini, right? So you're able to enter information and save, right? The same way a spreadsheet works. But there's some software you can, okay, make it bigger. The screen res. Yeah, that will have to be changed as well. So I think I've changed the resolution, so I have to reorient the recorder. All right, so going on. So back to this. So what I just did was I created a database table that has some information, right? And this is easy to use. Anyone can just come here and say, oh, let's type some information, type some names. Right. So this is just a simple database that you can type something, enter information, it's saved. But this is a little bit better than having a spreadsheet, right? So how many people have used spreadsheets like Excel, Word, so on, right? So how many people have used databases? For everybody. Okay, so why would you use a database instead of using a spreadsheet? Well, not just the more. So please know that if you're using the old version of Excel, the newer versions have more rows. So someone will say, well, I can still use my spreadsheet. It's beautiful. So it's not just that. There are more to it. So that's a good answer, but there are more. So. Okay, so for databases, the main thing is, unlike just, but there are some slight differences. The spreadsheets these days, like Excel, when it crashes, it tries to help you out to say, oh, you had this old version. But most of the databases, even years ago, were able to, even if on a crash, recover the information, bring it to where you were working exactly. So they have that advantage. Okay, so that's a very good point. That is, unlike just spreadsheets, so I know some of you are excellent coders and you can write code that can go to an Excel sheet, go and pull a column in a row and perform some different functions. But it's much easier to deal with a database than a spreadsheet because the database, first of all, the data is organized. There's some sort of organization, at least most of them, there will be some organization. And then you can write queries, and the queries can be ad hoc. They don't have to be things that you plan ahead of time. So long as the data is there, you can often run queries against them. Right? Of course, I just put a little asterisk next to it that it also depends on what you're allowed to do. There are some companies that are selling products where they will say, we'll host your data for you, but they may restrict the type of queries you can run. Some of them may say, okay, you can't do grouping, you can't do aggregation, you can't sort. So depending on the type of service you have, not every query will be available. But generally, when you have a DBMS, you are able to query, pull the data any way that you want. So any other? Okay, so that's a good point. So if you have a spreadsheet, let's say I give you my Excel, and in the Excel, there's information for students, information for staff, and so on. Most sheets like Excel, all they'll tell you is you can lock this, they will have something, you can lock these rows, or you can lock these columns, right? So in terms of controlling what people can do, or even limiting the queries, you can make a database and say, oh, for this database, this user, when connected, can only select from this table, but not that table, or can insert, or can even delete just these values, but not other values. So you can limit the types of queries that users can run. So it's a key part of security for a database. Unlike, let's say, Excel, if I give you my Excel sheet and I have not taken the time to go through, it will be much more complex to try and restrict what people are doing in the Excel sheet. So I'll say the kinds of queries, the number of queries, unless someone at the front end. So as I said, some companies currently are selling database products where they'll host for you and they could restrict you on even how many queries you can run in a day, right? So those, some of the cloud services, you can put your data up, but they'll say if you query maybe more than 1 million times in a day, they'll charge you a certain amount, right? So you can put certain restrictions in, but I'd say the most important thing is for the security part, they can most importantly restrict the types of queries you can be running in there. So for someone, maybe you can only do selection. Someone can do updates. Someone can do deletion. Someone can even create other users, but some people can't create anything. Some people too may just be able to do backup. They can't do anything. They can't delete. They can't update. Their job is they just what? Download data and upload data. Right. So contributions to why database over Excel. As far as that, what I'm seeing now is a lot of databases are giving us more and more interfaces like this one. You have rows and columns that look a little bit like the Excel. So they are blurring the boundaries a bit, right? But I would say that for a DBMS, usually having someone or having a system in the background who is checking for the security, the integrity of the data, checking for that it's asset compliant or that transactions are being followed. Even take these transactions. Can you make an Excel sheet do a transaction? So when I say Excel, I'm not saying Excel is bad. Microsoft also has Microsoft SQL Server, right? But Excel or any other spreadsheet that you have, you can't do a transaction. You can't say make sure you enter the name here, the age there, do this before what I would save. But in a DBMS, you can say, oh, I have a transaction, do this task, do this task, do that task before what I accept everything. In Excel, someone can just start typing. Well, I should suggest actually in spreadsheets, someone can just start typing and hit enter, right, and save, and that is it, irrespective of whether or not the data is complete, right? They can just type half of the name and leave it, half of the age and leave it. But in a database, you can say, oh, you know what? These are the constraints. If you don't fill in all of this, it will not be saved. Or even when it's writing, it starts saving, maybe putting the first name, last name. It didn't finish entering a person's data. If it goes off and it wasn't complete, the database will just say ignore that because it's not what one complete transaction. So databases do have those capabilities. Right? So any others, those are the ones I have in mind, but there's one that's missing. So yeah, that's a very good one. Mhm. Yeah. So even then, there are no transactions. It's durable. So what people are doing is, as I said, the boundaries between database and spreadsheets are being blurred all the time by companies. So Google Docs is. I should also mention that Microsoft has their version of Excel online. So both of them will allow multiple users. But it's just that someone has to go add in the extra code to make sure that you can have multiple users. But by default, currently I can't be working on an Excel document and someone is what? In the same document. If you go online, then it's different. I mean, someone will write code to make sure that when someone types, it saves it, another person types, it puts it in. But that multiple user effect is something that DBMSs have and rely on a lot. So Courseware is multi-user as far as the database. Multiple people are connecting, submitting assignments, and so on. The Ashesi website is, I think, there's a database in the background, has all the articles. Anytime they make any edits, presents it. Different people are querying. Anytime you view a page, it does all the querying, pull the data from the database, presents the article, right? So databases are being used just about anywhere. When you're buying credits for your cell phone, there's a database that will keep track of this user has entered this scratch card. If you scratch twice and enter twice, it will give you a warning, I think, these days. If you try to use the same code to load credit onto your phone, or people have not gotten that warning before. You don't try to do anything illegal. Not that I try to do anything illegal, but if you make a mistake and you enter the same, it'll tell you you have already used this card or this card has already been used. And when you use it, so there are many databases in our lives that are controlling many things, right? Or supporting many features. Okay, so we know what a database is, at least we have the idea. But what I was going to show you today was what is it that is this database thing people are talking about. So people say database has done this, and database has done this. And the question is, this database person, where is he and what is he doing? Right. So that's what we are going to look at. At least that was one of the goals for showing you the back end. Right. So this is not to scare you or make you worried about database management systems, but just to show you what is there in the back. So if you ever run into the case where you need to do something in the back end, you are not afraid. Right. Um, so I have too many things in there, right? Um, Okay, so what I'm doing here is this is just command prompt. It's good if at the end of the semester you meet me somewhere and you learn command prompt because it's good. So I have here wherever I installed my database to, right? And in there is a bin folder. And what bin means is binary. So that's where the actual code is. Some of you have done some Java programming already. So you know that for any program to do what it's doing, there's someone who has written the code, has compiled it, and has what? Put it there for you to use. So I'm showing you where the code is. The code that is doing all the entry processing, the queries, and so on. All right. So the code that's compiled, there are two parts to it. The first part is the daemon. So it's a service. It's a program that runs and listens for requests that people are making to it. So it will listen, do the processing, and give the response back. So there's that guy who's handling, so MySQL he's handling the request. And MySQL, this one, that one is the one that can be the client, right? And if you have any code like Java or C#, what they'll do is they'll write a library. So you've done Java programming, you know what a library is, right? Some collection of code that you can import. And then when you send a command, that library, instead of just being a standalone program, will allow you to make the function call that would execute what you would have done in a standalone program. So you can say, go and query this for me, go and insert this for me, go and delete this for me. Right? So the information that is here, so my workbench, let me pull my workbench up again. This is my workbench, and in my workbench, I have a table of person, and that one has person ID, first name, last name, and those are some names. Right. What I'm going to do is I'll connect with the client, the MySQL, just so you can see that different programs can what? Pull the same data. You don't have to memorize the commands today, right? Well, there's no memorization involved. If you use it enough, to remember without having to memorize. Okay. Okay, I need password. Oh, I thought that was the one I was. Okay. Isn't this the same data? Right? You can see there's 1 Kofi, Mafo, 2 Alex Dodd, 3 Kwame Binding, 4 Stephanie Allison. Right? So it means that even though there are different programs, all of them are what? Asking the server. So there's that MySQL D. There's a program that's there who is just what? Listening for different requests. So this program that's running now, this MySQL, just this without the D, just MySQL, he's making requests to the daemon. So the daemon is like almost like a librarian. He sits there, not daemon like demon with phones, but right. So what it's doing is that program is sitting there, listening to all the questions that people are asking it, and then sending a result back. Right. So that means MySQL Workbench is not a database management system. People think that, okay, this is the DBMS. MySQL Workbench, please don't ever say anywhere that MySQL Workbench is a database management system. It is just what? A front end, a client, something that can connect to a database and then what? Retrieve information. The same way as, who else is a client? This command prompt, this program here, is also a client, right? It just connects and then retrieves information, right? Can anyone think of other clients that are possible with a database? I've already said some today, but you can think of others. Other clients. Web pages often tend to be clients to databases. But at the beginning of the web page, you connect to some information, process it, and then present you with all the nice tables and graphics and emails. So web pages are a good one. Any others? There are so many. If you use computers, there are so many things that are pulling from databases. Should be able to give me more. That's a different type of. Yeah, so the OSs do keep, like for Windows, there's the registry, so there's a database of sorts. But I mean, for a normal one, not to say that yours is not valid, it's possible to build a database, sorry, an OS that pulls from a database its information, right? But I'm looking for others that are more like if I had MySQL or something that has tables that people can associate much easily. So OS is okay, but I want more. I think there's an ad like that. You want more. Probably a song too. I'll find it. She wants more. I think the song is. Or there's no such song. Okay. All right. So more database clients. Okay. So streaming applications such as Spotify is a good one. YouTube. All of them may be connecting to some database, pulling the information in order to what? Present you the information that you have. Right? Or even in security, you have your antivirus. Whenever it runs out or it knows that there's a new, it actually will download a new database of viruses from a central repository, update the database, and then what? Do better scans. So databases seem to be everywhere. I don't know where you can, yeah. It's just that in our current, I'll say our current setting, most companies will use a lot of information. So it's hard to avoid databases entirely. I don't know any company that can really avoid using databases just to keep everything on paper. And well, I can't imagine that being the case. You have to use some database somehow. It may be small, but you will need to keep the information somewhere. Even if you will not call it a database, just by keep making a sheet and keeping rows, columns, you are making a database of some sort. To pull, yes. Those are clients, yes. But what you should know is some of the clients will connect through other clients, so other services who then pull from a database. So the mobile version of the program you have on your phones, it doesn't connect to the database directly. What it does is there are some services that it also connects to on the server, and those services will pull the data for it. So some of them won't be directly to the database. They may go through an intermediary who then does all the processing, formatting, and presents it. So the information you view on the phone is a little bit restricted, but that's just because it's going through another service who is then pulling from the database. Yeah. But the web page one pulls directly from the databases. Right. So people are cool, right? Different clients. So Workbench is a client, this one is a client, right? So I can run a query. So a query, for example, is select star from person. That means that get everything from person, right? And I run this, it's giving me a result. So I'm going to show you the program that is giving the result. I'm going to stop it so you can appreciate that difference between what? The client and the server. So the client is here. Remember that when I started, I said he was running in services. Yeah, it started. But what if I stop it? I just stopped it. Going back here, I'm going to try and run a query. Lost connection to server. Right. So this is an important part of understanding DBMSs. You have to realize that there's a client and then there's a server. If the server goes off, the client can't get any more information. So I won't turn Coswell off, but yeah, if we turn that database off, it doesn't matter all the PHP code, Python code, Perl code, all that code will not work. Won't work because it will try to pull information. There's nothing to pull. And at the same time, so those who think Workbench is a database, if you try and run the same query now, error, can't connect. Right. So that process has to be running. So that is the daemon. So at the very least, by the end of this week, one of the things that should be in your heart, maybe next to your love of something else that you love very much, should be understanding that databases are very common in our lives and they will often involve a client and a server. If the server is not working, the client can't work, can't get any data. You can use others, but some of the tasks you perform in this class may require that you use this. We may draw some diagrams and so on. For this one, a lot of things are already embedded. So this one advert for MySQL Workbench, but it's just what we are using. You can do models, that's draw diagrams. You can administer the database all from this interface. So I tended to use this. And you also have multiple tabbing. You can make all your tabs. You can save them. You can make your diagrams. You can save them, open them. So I tended to like this one. I know some people are using PHP admin and so on, but I tend to, for this class, prefer this one. Okay, so for example, let's say you sign up for iTunes. The moment you log in, after your username and password has been checked, it will often go and pull. So this is 100 for iTunes, just using as an example. It will go and pull your music playlist, maybe the things you bought, the albums you set up, the favorites, your playlist. It will go and pull everything, but it's just in a database, right? So sometimes what I said was sometimes it will not connect directly to the database. Sometimes there's an intermediate program that it sends the request to, and that program will then connect the database, pull the information, and send it back. So it's like a man in the middle, right? So that means that someone can be both a client and a server. So when someone says client, often client or server, it also depends on what is happening, right? So from one point of view, so let me see if I can quickly, possible, depends on my drawing skill. So let's do some shapes. All right. Yeah, my line drawing skills are not very good, but I'll try. Oh, sorry. Okay. I really should use a tablet for this next time. Okay, so usually the client will make a request and then the server will return the data. So what I was pointing out to you was, even though this is a very simple architecture as far as software design, you could also have something where that client is also getting requests and responses from somebody else. Right. That means that from this person's perspective, this client is a client to this server, but this one here, as far as he's concerned, this is his server. Oh, I just thought I was doing text. I hope you understand. So when someone says something is a client and something is a server, it may just work almost like me, employee and employer, right? So as far as a database, if I say MySQL database, that I have a server and someone is the client, I may mean either that or that. But often people mean the guy connecting directly. But people may also be implicit clients, right? In that you are requesting from this person who is also requesting from, right? Is that answering your question? So the web version is this one. The mobile version is the one below. The web version is closer to this. Why is it not minding? Well, okay. I'm sure people will be fine. Wow, now it's changed. I suppose I should have just clicked again and started. Right. So that's what I meant by, for the mobile version, it might not be connecting directly to the database. It might be asking a program in the middle to do the connection on its behalf and format it for the mobile device. Are people cool? But it's actually on the server. So that means that there's an API or some language format that is sent to, and that one translates. That's the queries. It's possible to move it to the phone, but currently the phone is meant to be thin, lightweight, so we don't push a lot. So if you look at the phone version, it doesn't do a lot of things that you have on the full screen or the desktop version. On the desktop version, you can edit, do a few more things than what the mobile has. Right. So that means that one actually would pick the things that are going to mobile and send it on, but it doesn't send everything to the mobile device. All right. So I saw some questions. Question. Oh, there's a problem with the pen drive. All right, so let's continue with our discussion, right? So what we're looking at was the server and the client, right? And so this server is some program that is running. And so it has to be running before what we connect with and make certain changes to the database. Right? So let's go into where MySQL has been installed, right? I already had it, but let me open it up again. Sorry. Okay. So in your bin folder, that was where the MySQL D and MySQL were living. So there's at least a server and a client on your machine. At least a server and a client. Now, so I right-clicked and used shift right-click. If you're trying to do command prompt and you want to get your location quickly, when you do shift right-click, normal right-click gives you this. What I'm looking for in particular is open command window here. Right. Make sure. All right. So this is my part is a little bit long, so sad, but yeah, I'll try to. Okay, so it means that if I actually run the program MySQL D, it should what? It should start my server, right? So MySQL D is the server person, right? So if I type MySQL D and start it, right? And you can see that the program it starts and then there's a cursor, it stopped. It gave some warnings about timestamp. But that means that now that program is running. Most of the programs you create, what they do is they start and then they exit, they stop, and you can continue. Now, what this program does is it started and it's what? It's held on, it's still alive. That means that's how it actually runs. It's a program that will start and then will listen for the different queries that are going to come to it. So it's not your normal program that just starts, dies. What it will do is it starts and what? Stays on so that it can listen to the requests. So MySQL D, so I'm just showing you that even though you have your services, and that's where you start something and what you think that's, oh, my program lives in services. Your program doesn't live in services. The services list is just a user interface for you to start this program. Right? So once this program has started, then right, the query can take place, right? Because that program is running. If I kill that program, so let me run it again. If I go here, so to kill, I'll do Control C. Die. Okay, that's not a good way. I'll have to edit it out. Okay. Have to. Did I kill him? Find a way to kill him. Or did he run the service again? Just a sec. My services. Yeah, here it is. It stopped. Okay, let me refresh to see if you will. Okay, I don't think I killed it in a good way. I should have done the control C to kill it, but it might be hanging somewhere in the system. Yeah, so by just closing the window, I didn't kill it off. I'll do that on the other line. So, yeah, it has 9 lines. So I'll find a way to kill it. Um, so I'm going to the task manager to search for. There he is. MySQLD. He's still hanging around. Okay, so if I now end the process, now I'm getting the error. But people understand an important part of databases. That means that if you go and work somewhere and people say they can't connect to the database, if you sit at the person's machine, that gives a hint as to what you can do. You should ask, where is the database running? That's a logical question. Or where is this, what machine is it on? That is wherever the server is, that's where you're supposed to try and get it to start. So that is just so people understand the client and the server. So I hope that I've demonstrated to you that there's a program that we had to run. So running the program can either be done automatically in Windows services or what? You can go to the bin directory. Sorry. I was just trying to make the list shorter. Okay. You can go to the bin directory, find the MySQLD and run it. So for those people who are running either from a pen drive or from a portable device, or maybe if you go and you work on a server somewhere and you are wondering, how do I start the server? This is how you start it. Go and find where the database is installed. Go to the bin directory. So for some of you, maybe you don't own the machine you are working on, and you just copied a database folder or you unzipped it and put it there. This is how you start your database. And the moment you type the name MySQLD, right? It hangs. You don't see a lot of action here. It doesn't mean that it's not working. It's actually running. And that's why when it's running, the queries can work. Just one more time. The queries can work. Of course, just closing the window didn't kill it. What we had to do was to use the task manager. So let me see if I can find my task manager. This one? Okay, that one. And then go and kill off MySQLD. So now that it's stopped, the client can't use it anymore. So this is a very important lesson. I think for the server, it's catching the control C. It's like you can code and catch different things that the user is trying to do. Usually, people will not just try and stop a server. I mean, it's not this way, not just control C, right? So it's possible that it's just catching it, and even if I kill it, it hangs on. So I can't kill it just from the command prompt. I don't know why this one is behaving that way, but from the next, just do control C or kill it. But for the Windows one, it doesn't seem to allow it to go all the way. But it's coding wise. That means that when it sees the event, control C, it should die. But the process is catching it and saying, oh, okay, ignore whatever I'm trying to do. Okay, so I think does it always need a client? So keep in mind that as far as the server and the client, all they have done is to group the different libraries. There's one group of functions that deals with what? Listening for the requests and processing the requests. And another group of functions that deals with what? Taking your request and sending it to the server. There's nothing to stop you, for example, taking the two pieces of code and putting them together as one. Microsoft Access is like that. I think the server and the client, they are more or less the same thing. Like when you click and you open, it's single user, or you can do multi-user, but mostly you click and you open the file there. The system operates directly on the file, and it's not really separating them out into client and server. So it depends on the system that's been implemented. Okay, so it depends. So if you look at again Microsoft Access, that means that there is a Microsoft program they have written. Now, when you click on the file name, we'll open the file. The file contains the database contents, and then when you're editing, it directly edits the file. With this client-server model, right? What it's doing is it is separating the server from the client, so that across the network, other people can connect. So it's just a different way to put the pieces together. Right. So it's possible you can meet a DBMS or someone says, oh, I have a database system, but it is all together as one. Right. But often there will be different pieces in order to support network access for multiple users. Often they'll have to separate the server from the client so that when one server is there, multiple clients can connect. But if that's not your goal, you could make a DBMS where you say, you know what, when you click, everything is within one big executable. So it's just like someone saying, I have a Java file, everything is together. When you click, then when you start the program, the server is running or I'm processing the files for you. But here, they have been separated. Right. So aside from just having the benefits of it being modular, easy to test, and so on, for this one, they needed to, well, it's good to separate so that the server is listening on the network, is listening on a port on the network, so that it can allow multiple people to connect. So they didn't want it to be, you need to have both the client and the server to use the system. So I can have the server sitting on this machine. You can have just the client on your machine or your phone or device and connect to it. You don't need to install everything in order to use. But that means that they've just been separated. So you can shift the workload between one machine and the other. Yes, you can manipulate the data through the client. Right. But the server is what takes the request of the client and works on it for you. No, I said the workbench. So please, this is important. The workbench, where is the workbench? This workbench is not the DBMS. This is a client. The proper DBMS is actually that MySQL D. He's the person who is tasked with retrieving the command, processing it, and so on. So I'm trying to make you at least remember, this even in friendly speak, to differentiate between the client and the server. Right. So if quick question, I ask you, give me an example of a database management system, MySQL workbench. So for the case of Microsoft Access, there's a little bit of a special case in that Microsoft Access itself, you get these files called .mdb files. So you get a file, but when you click it, it's handled by the Microsoft Access program that then opens an interface for you to manipulate the file. So it's almost like the server, that part that does the server and client is actually the installation. But the data itself, you can move around. So if you get to a machine that has access, then you can use it. But it's not really separated into client and server. Right? But there are features, so those of you who are wondering, there are features to allow you to access, for multiple people to share or use a Microsoft Access file. There are features for that. Oh, yeah. Free advertising for AVG, right? Postpone. Yeah, I just want to finish today. Okay. So this is the first part for today, right? So then the second part is we are going to look at where we've got into in the textbook. We are actually going to merge 2 or 3 chapters in the discussion, at least the beginning, so that you can link them, because it's almost like you're doing little pieces. But when you see the 3 things together, it makes much more sense than just to talk about the theory.
Quick question about the separation of client.
Okay.
So using the diagram of chapter 1, the query compiler and transaction manager be the client.
Okay, so in chapter 1, there's a diagram. Sorry. Let's go. That shows the components of a DBMS. Right. This one. Try and zoom in. Okay, so that's a very good question. So what it means is things like MySQL, Workbench, those are all user applications. Right. The server takes over from here on down. From the 2 arrows down, that's all the server's business. So the server is the one who's going to take the query, break it down. All of that is going to happen within the MySQL D. But the user program is any other program that is connecting. So MySQL, not with the D, just MySQL, that program living there is connecting. The Workbench can connect. There are others like the MySQL Yog, PHMadmin. All those are just what? User applications that are connecting. But all of from queries, updates down, taking it and processing it, everything is within the DBMS. Are people... Okay, so all right, so Workbench also supports, and that's the other part I was talking about. It also supports administration. Let me see. Okay, here it is, management. So schemas is one part, management is the other. And under the management part, if you were supposed to, let's say, go to users, okay, the connection is off. If you're supposed to modify users and so on, that means that for this program, the Workbench is both an administrative console and also what? A query console. They have merged a lot of features. So it does the diagrams, it does the queries for both just data manipulation, data definition, and also database administration. Everything is together. So they are all clients, but now they have been put together as one. It used to be separate programs. About 4 or 5 years ago, they used to be, you have to download this to do administration. You have to download this to do queries. But I think now it's just one install. When you can do your administration, you can do your queries. Currently, so that is the next part we have to touch on. Currently, mine is running on 3306. So that is 3306. All right. That's the other part of the discussion for today. Well, the one in the middle, which is internet. That if you have an operating system, right? Okay, there's nothing for it to connect to. Let me open the. Yeah, people are going to not like me very much, but I'm going to do it. All right. So the bin, remember, contained what? The MySQL D and MySQL. But when MySQL is starting, you need to know how to listen for the requests that are coming in. And at some point, I was hoping that someone asked me, how does it listen for the request? But nobody asked me. That's good. That's good. Right. So there's a configuration file. So in your MySQL bin, well, just above the bin, that means in your main installation folder, there's an INI file. It's usually my.ini, right? And what this INI file does is it contains initialization information for the server that will run, right? Now, the way a computer works, it works a little bit like a company, and there are many, many phone lines that people can listen on. But in this case, the different lines, they are called ports. So, and in this case, so this is a MySQL INI file. If you want MySQL server to do something specific for you, in terms of what it should do when it's running, often the INI file contains the information. So for example, mine, so the client is saying if it's a client, it should use character set UTF-8, and it should also use port 3306. Right? So it means that the client, okay, if it's connecting, has been told to use this port. The port is like a phone number. Are people understanding? No. Okay. Let me see. Let me try and do one example. At least a good one. Okay, so if you have your Workbench, what people do is once your server has started, you need to what? Connect your client to the server. So you click this add connection button. And when you ask to add a connection, there's an option to add the host name. The host name is the name of the computer. So if you have a computer network, all the computers on there, if it's reachable, so let's say we go to the lab and you're all on wireless. Do you people know how to check their IP? Either IP config or Let me see if this will work out. Right click. Someone saying we have status. Okay. Status. Is it details or properties? Okay, so here you have, that's my IP address. Right. Subnet mask. Where's my gateway? That's my gateway. Often, if people share the same gateway, they are able to communicate much more easily. Other than that, you have to worry about routing. But if we are all on the Ashesi campus and someone is running a database on their machine and there's no firewall, so a firewall is another program that watches the different connections coming into a machine and could block or allow depending on the configuration. Right? So it means that if you enter this as the host name, that is this machine. So it means other people can connect to the machine. But when connecting, if a database is running, remember that I said that there was in the file, there was an INI, this one, that says that the port is what, 3306. It means that if someone is also connecting, he also must what? Dial the machine name and then what? The extension. The same way that if you wanted to call me, you have to know the Ashesi, well, our main number, which is where we are. What's our number? I can't remember, I think. Right. And then the extension of the person you want to reach. So one of them, so the host name, that's like the main number, and the port is like the extension. And it's also asking for username. And when you are installing MySQL, remember I said make sure you pay attention to what your password was. You can add in your password and then you can connect. So let me see. Test connection. No, failed to connect. There's no server running, right? I have to run. Okay, so I'm running it now. And if I test connection, it's now asking me for what the password is. Right. It is successful. So this is how you can actually, once your server is running, you can let the workbench connect to it so that what you can start practicing queries. Currently, my firewall will block you because I don't think I've opened up to that port. Right, but if you, let's say, if you've gone to an organization and you're told to make a database that many people connect to, usually either you go to a Windows firewall and add an exception, or if you're on Linux, you add an exception. So just whichever OS you have, open the port for the database. That's 3306. You can change it to something else. So we'll come back. Okay, so ask and then we'll go back. A follow-up. Okay. So it depends on your firewall. I'm giving a warning about firewall because a lot of operating systems now, they are very conservative as far as firewalls. So if you create your database, you are running it, and other people can connect, you might want to check the firewall to see, has your OS a firewall that's preventing you from accessing. But it's possible. Let me find, I think there's a database system here before I take his question. I think this one, oh, it's not this one. I know there was one that we were testing with. Okay. Okay, so this database is not here. It's on somewhere on the SIS, right? I think we're testing. Okay, let me see if it still will respond. If it's running, it should respond. If not, so it's saying SIS or access.edu.gh. So there is some database. Well, it's not. I believe it is responding, but let's see what it will say. But okay, so this is an example where it is on another machine. So if, oh, okay, so maybe it's not running. Unknown host. Oh, wait, unknown host is, why can't you know what that is? Does it mean I'm not on the internet really? So if the machine that you are connecting to, so right now it's trying to connect to SRS. There's a database there. So if the machine is not your current machine, it has to go over the network. Right? And so it means that if your internet is not working or your Wi-Fi is off, you will not be able to access a database that is not on your machine. Are people understanding that? Right. So it means that if my Wi-Fi is malfunctioning, then I may not be able to do anything.
My question is, when you are telling a client to connect to a switch server, do you edit the INI file, or is that always pulled out?
Okay, so that's a good question. So if you have an INI file, so let's pull this one, right? The INI file is not changed often. You don't keep changing it. Usually, once you set up, if you are the administrator, you set it up because, for example, other people are connecting all the time. Just say, okay, you know what? This is going to be the port we have all agreed on. Henceforth, once the database starts, it's running on this port. If a client is going to connect, for MySQL, the default is 3306. But if I change it here and started it again, it will run on the new port. That means that all the clients have to use a new extension to connect.
So this INI file is outlining what the server
What it will do when it
access
starts.
the server.
So this is outlining how the server is going to start. It's an initialization file, INI initialization. So it means when it starts, it knows the types of characters that he allows, types of coding it allows, and also the port. So the port. So once it starts, then every client has to use 3306.
Okay. So this is from the perspective of
The server. Yeah, so this is from the perspective of the server. So the server would say 3306, and then all the clients will have to also what? Use 3306 to connect.
as a client to connect to the database. Is there a way
To pick your port. You can't pick your port.
I mean, no, like to
Change the port.
change
Oh, you can change the, okay, that's a good one. You can change the server as, so if you pick this one, this workbench, oh, sorry, I think I've crashed something, but yeah, I've done some things, some strange things. I hope I don't have to kill this off. Okay, I'll just move it down. So you can see that in the workbench, I've added more than one connection. So for a client, you can connect more than one server, as many as your resources allow. But often you are connecting for some reason. So you connect, you perform your query, and then you disconnect. So the workbench, I'm using it to connect to, I'm doing accessible work, I'm doing teaching, a lot of other things. Go over there. Okay, so the host name. So first question is, do people know what a host name is? It's just like a domain name, right? So, well, a domain name, but I can have more than that. So if you say domain name is like access.edu.gh, but you can do sis.access.edu.gh, air.access.edu.gh. So the host name is just the name of the computer on the network, right? So if you have access, you need to have sis.access.local. Do people remember that? Right. So that means there was a machine that was given a name, and whenever you type sis.access.local, it would ask your DNS, that's your domain name server or service, what IP, what number is mapped to that name, and then forwards it on. Right. So that is your host name. So there's some machine. Now there can be a numeric host name, like I think every machine costs one, right? And there can be a much more friendlier host name like this. But if you have a friendly host name like this, it means that either the network is configured to translate this for you, or your DNS server knows it, or your machine knows that this name goes with this number, right? So every machine on the network. So if in future and we should try this in the lab, people have started their machines. You can try with your friend, ask him what his IP is, make sure that he turns off his at least allow 3206 in his firewall, and then if you enter his name and his port, you should be able to connect to his database. Right. But the root, my warning about the root is that root normally for MySQL, it used to be open free for all. But currently, you are not allowed to connect to root from off the machine. So he has to make a new user and then give you username password so that you can connect from outside the machine. So on your own machine, you can do root as much as you like. But if you have other people connecting, you might have to create a user for them, give them a username, a password, so that they can They can connect. So host name is the name of your machine. The port is like the extension it's running on, and then you have to specify your username. So are people cool? Okay, so that is It's a fair point. So what happened was last week people installed MySQL. I thought people would be able to by now start using it, but people have not been able to. That's why today's class, I'm stopping on MySQL and allowing you to. We would have continued chapter 2. But if you don't get used to the MySQL, you would still be confused when we start creating database tables. That's why I'm showing you, as I said at the beginning of the class, what MySQL is doing, what the server is, what the client is. So I'm hoping that today you understand that part. So in future, if I say start your database, I don't want you to be start your database and someone tells me, I don't know where to start my database. I don't know where my server is. Are you understanding? I understand your point that yes, so if there's a change in plan, a serious change in plan, we'll put it up. But if I realize that people are falling behind on some task, I will stop on that task and go through. So you have installed your workbench, yes? But no, today no. So by now, your workbench and your database should have been installed. But some people were having issues connecting to it and so on. So what I did was, today, instead of just starting the queries and people saying they can't, I'm trying to getting into understanding that this is how we start a DB, this is how we query to a DB. So I guess my goal for today is, are you able to? Will you be able to? Okay, so let's stop, and then the people who have questions about starting, we can have.